Are you feeling worse after meals with long COVID? Histamine intolerance might be the culprit. Learn how to reverse your symptoms with these key dietary changes. Hello, and welcome to this growing community of people who are ready to heal from the weird mystery symptoms that conventional medicine doesn't have answers for. I am Carrie Bailey, your functional nutritionist, and I help people with long COVID and other weird mystery symptoms. And we use specific therapeutic foods, supplements, and herbs to heal. Let's start by talking about what histamine intolerance is. Histamine intolerance is a chronic condition that causes histamine reactions. It's much more common in people with digestive issues like maybe celiac or irritable bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome or SIBO. But histamine is a signaling molecule that's released by your mast cells in response to hazards like toxins and pathogens. Mast cells are part of your immune system. They are a type of white blood cell that's found in your connective tissues throughout your body. So that means they're found in your nervous system. They're wrapped around your blood vessels, around your nerves. And mast cells are even in your brain. Some of the signs you might have histamine intolerance are that your skin is itchy, swollen, hives, rashes. In your nose, it might be stuffy or runny. You might have nasal congestion or sneezy. Your throat might be swollen, like your lips or your throat could be swollen. Your lungs, your paths, you might have narrowing in your airways. You might have wheezing, coughing, or trouble breathing. You might have other symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, bloating, nausea, headache, low blood pressure, increased heart rate, flushing, or pain. And of course, the most severe histamine reaction is anaphylaxis, and that's when the throat closes. And if the throat closes and you don't have air, that can be fatal. You'll notice that those symptoms are never in isolation, that those symptoms always accompany something related to your nervous system. This could be anxiety, heart palpitations, rapid heartbeat, headaches, things like that. If your symptoms get better when you take a medication like Zyrtec or Benadryl, you know that histamines are part of your landscape. There's 3 reasons why you're having these histamine reactions during long COVID. So let's talk about them. First, you're not methylating well. Methylation is what happens about 1 billion times a second in your body, and it requires the nutrients of methylfolate, zinc, and B12, which can be found in your food, but usually if you're not methylating well, it means a deficiency, a long-term deficiency along the way. You need the nutrients of methylfolate, zinc, and B12 in order to make SAMe. SAMe is the end goal because SAMe is the cofactor for a lot of genes, one of which is your gene to reduce and eliminate histamines, which is histamine N-methyltransferase. So SAMe is required to make this histamine gene work better. And so it needs those nutrients. So now you can see why you need methylfolate, B12, and zinc to get to SAMe to make the cofactor for that gene. So I don't like to think of genes as on and off. I like to think of them as working optimally or working fast or working slow. So these genes are slowed. That means they don't work well anytime you have an infection, some kind of pathogen in the body. These genes will run faster if you're male. So lucky you, males, right? And by nature, it runs slower in women. And so therefore it can explain why women have a lot more histamine issues than men. I do not recommend supplementing with SAMe. Taking SAMe can be problematic, especially if you have any family history of bipolar. Even if you don't, I always recommend do not take SAMe on its own. Always work with a practitioner on that nutrient. The second reason you might be having these histamine reactions is that you have multiple infections. Usually it's not just one infection, there's usually multiple. It's could be viral infections like Epstein-Barr. It could be unwanted bacterial infections, E. coli, Clostridia, Streptococcus. And there's a lot of variants on each of those viruses. There's a lot of variants, and then it depends again on how they're expressing, right? The more symptoms you have and the more severe the symptoms you have, the more of a chance that you have a lot of virus, right? Either the volume is a lot or they're big and strong. The problem is that tests are not always accurate, and there's not always tests to find all these things. And so I like to really rely on symptoms in order to figure out if we're getting the right response, if things are moving in the right direction. So I'm always checking in with people. And so again, it's the symptoms and the type of symptoms that are going to dictate, is it a virus? Is it unwanted bacteria? So the symptoms are our gauge, our thermostat, if you will, to figure out where we're going, what we're doing. The third reason you're having histamine reactions is because your liver is overflowing with toxins and pathogens and any waste that those also create. The liver isn't able to break down and get rid of those, or it's so overstuffed, over stagnant, slow that it just starts spilling out. Sort of like if you didn't take your garbage out, right? If you keep putting garbage in the garbage, eventually it's just going to start spilling out because it can't hold, the can can't hold it anymore. So the liver can't process things either because it doesn't have the nutrients it needs, or it's just overburdened. Also, there might be a lack of bacteria in your digestive tract. That good bacteria in your digestive tract helps you make nutrients, right? It, along with your liver, are the two body parts that help you make the nutrients to get from your food or your supplements for your body to work. So it becomes this domino effect of, did it start with a poor diet? For instance, I know I grew up on TV dinners and pot pies. So I was definitely on the standard American diet, poor diet most of my life. The nutrient deficiencies, getting one or more pathogens, right? So it just becomes this, snowball effect, right? All these things are adding on and creating more and more problems. And next thing you know, your garbage can is overflowing, AKA your liver. Before I talk about the low histamine diet and how do you eat using that, I want to tell you about an awesome tool I've been working on that is finally ready. It's my long COVID recovery guide, and I'm so excited to share it with you. It's my guide to all the essential steps to heal long COVID. But if you've already signed up for it, that's awesome. Make sure you check your email. It should be in there. If you are interested in signing up for the long COVID recovery guide, pop a link in the comments or the description below, and we'll get that right off to you. I believe that the low histamine diet, it has some pluses, it has some minuses. So I want to talk a little bit about what I like, what I agree with on the low histamine diet and what I don't agree with. I think the most important thing you can do when you have histamine issues is to move to a low-fat diet. So let me explain. I just explained this in other videos, so bear with me if you're a continuous watcher. If you're brand new, this is going to be great, insightful information for you. When you eat a high-fat diet, eat animals or not, right? It can still both be high-fat diets. So that fat in the blood makes it thick, and it makes it hard for the liver to do its job of cleaning that blood, of pulling out the nutrients. When the blood is thick, there isn't enough room in there. Even if you take your supplements, right, there's not enough room for those supplements, the nutrients from your food to get to your liver where it needs to go. There's also no room in your blood if it's thick with fat in order for it to get its other optimal nutrients, which are glucose, minerals, water, and oxygen. All of those nutrients your body needs. Here's some ways to reduce your overall fat intake. So if you're going to make vegetables, instead of putting oil or butter on them, what if you steam the vegetables, right? If you're going to saute a vegetable, you can saute it with water instead of oil. You just need a good nonstick pan. You also want to be sure that you have in your diet potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, like butternut squash, and fruit. This is where you're going to not only get your glucose from, you're going to get these in meals to sustain you in place of fat, right? Most people are like, I used to think this the same way. I cannot live without animal protein. That's what I thought. I didn't realize that I was relying on that fat to give me an adrenaline boost and to satiate my hunger. When you learn to eat and you learn to put in those starchy carbs, that can replace the animal protein. You just have to put in enough. And it's adjustment, right? You're making a pretty big adjustment, so you got to give yourself time. The second issue I have with the low histamine diet is that oftentimes people are told on certain diets what not to eat, but then that makes the what to eat the Wild West, right? Anything goes. The other side of the coin, people can eat whatever they want. So I find that it's important to tell people not only what not to eat, but what to eat. Yes, you can live on rice and beans, and you can go carnivore, keto, or low carb and survive, but those aren't healing diets. Carnivore, keto, and low carb are not going to be good for histamine issues. For one reason, in some way or another, you're going to get some meat that is aged or processed in some manner. Also, meat is high in fat. by nature. So the carnivore, keto, and low carb diets will always be high in fat. Eating this way is just managing your symptoms. So many people have told me, but Carrie, I feel so much better on carnivore, keto, whatever, right? I feel so much better. How can you explain that my symptoms are so much better? And I always explain that what you've done is you've taken the sugar away from the fat, or that those two combinations are the issue. If you're only eating fat, you don't have sugar in the system. That's why you're having success. But that's not a healing diet, right? Your liver doesn't need animal proteins or protein or fat, right? In fact, it needs the opposite. In order to heal the liver from toxins, pathogens, and everything, you need to reduce the fat. Eating this way is just managing symptoms. It's not healing the liver of toxins and pathogens that are causing it in the first place. That's why it's relieving your symptoms, because you've taken the sugar part away, but it is not healing. You cannot heal your body with just animal protein. The other thing I want to say is that, I was exploring, like, where did this low histamine diet, I learned about it in school, but then I started getting curious, like, where did this low histamine diet come from? What is the scientific evidence for it? And I could not find any, to be honest. But what I'm going to tell you now is, here's what I want you to eat and what to avoid instead. I want you to avoid all processed foods. That's a given, right? Processed foods is filling your belly. It is not giving you nutrition. Some of the key foods you're going to find in processed foods are things like citric acid. Citric acid on the ingredient label is made from GMO corn primarily, and it's also fermented with black mold. So if you have mold issues, you think you have mold issues, citric acid could be the factor behind it. Any food or drink that contains yeast. So this could be baked goods, cereal, alcohol, candy, any food or drink that is fermented, alcohol, pickles, pickled foods, kombucha, any aged or processed meats. So again, processed food can be meat too, right? So your smoked salmon, your dry aged beef, you want to avoid all of those. Avoiding all high fat foods. So this means nuts and seeds as much as possible. Keep it to a minimum, or take it out altogether. Again, if you're going for a fat-free diet, you're going to want to take out all nuts and seeds. Now, the two meats that are the highest in fat, which is hard for me too, because I'm like, they're super yummy, is pork and lamb. If you're eating meat, you want to figure out how to reduce it, start reducing it. I don't always recommend going cold turkey, but sometimes people like to. But start reducing your meat, right? If you're eating a 10-ounce steak with a meal, try reducing that. Can you eat 6 ounces? Can you eat 3 ounces? Can you make the rest up in non-starchy veggies? So that's a good way to transition. Just be curious. Let's say you try this for a week or two, right? Transition off of meat. And again, I'm not an anti-meat person, just so you know, but try to go off meat and all nuts and seeds and all oils and all fats. Try to go fat-free for some time. See how you feel. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, right? Just do a trial, do an experiment on yourself, because I know that you are going to feel better when you get that fat out of your diet. There is some dairy allowed on the low histamine diet, but I completely disagree. I think dairy needs to come out altogether, especially when there's a histamine issue, because histamine is allergens, right? So we talked about this before in different videos, where dairy creates mucus and histamine creates mucus. Now you've got this tons of mucus inside your body creating problems. Excess salt, right? Ideally, again, try to go salt-free for a week, but excess salt, even a good quality Himalayan or Celtic sea salt, will dehydrate your organs. Think about that they used salt to pickle things, to preserve things. So it's doing the same thing inside your liver. This can lead to swelling in the body, it can lead to water retention, and it can lead to unwanted weight gain. Salt is going to always worsen your symptoms. If you're going to have salt, to have a Himalayan or Celtic sea salt, do a trial as you're trying to heal, right? You might find that sea vegetables are better. Sea vegetables are a better source of nutrients, and they have that sodium that you need in a good way. And so I like to bring in, you can buy in kind of like salt shakers, pepper shakers. You can buy Atlantic dulse in those shakers. You can buy also kelp in those shakers, and you can put that on your food. Kelp and dulse are flavoring your food, but also providing healing benefits. Vinegar again is one that they usually don't recommend on a low histamine diet, and I agree. Vinegar dehydrates deep inside your organs. Vinegar, like salt, is used to pickle, preserve foods. And it's doing the same thing to your organs. So I always recommend, in place of vinegar, is to use lemon, lime, or the juice of it, or even the zest of it. And that's a pretty easy swap. Now, I want to eliminate the confusion, because people get confused because they said, oh, I'm told I shouldn't have lemon or lime on a low histamine diet. And I think somewhere along the way, people got confused, because lemon and lime is very healing, but it's also considered citrus or citric acid, right? But that's the natural form of citric acid. That's a good form. The one that's problematic, and the one that people need to be watching out for, is the man-made form, right? That's made with corn and mold, and you want it, and it's going to be on the ingredient label. If it's on the ingredient label, you want it out there. It's a preservative, it's a flavor enhancer, it's problematic. But lemons and limes and citrus is not the real problem. The low histamine diet usually recommends avoiding coffee and caffeine and chocolate, and I completely agree. Anything with caffeine is going to be acidic, and it's also, the caffeine is going to trigger your adrenaline, which is going to trigger your nervous system, which is already overtaxed by the toxins and pathogens that are at play. And so again, it's just going to rev the engine. I think of that's what I think about for caffeine, is revving the engine when you already got the histamine stuff going on. Let's talk about what to eat to reduce your histamines. So again, it's all about the liver. We want to really focus on the liver. And our goal is to cleanse and clear the liver with food. So you're eating not just to nutrify yourself, but to support your liver. I disagree with low histamine diet, removing fruits and vegetables that they suggest, because those are very supportive for the liver. So bananas, for instance, are very nourishing for the liver. It provides a good source of glucose, and it's got this slimy effect it's just really very healing. But the ripeness matters. If you get an overripe banana, if it's more than like a third brown spots, it's going to be fermented. And again, that's one of the things we want to take out on the low histamine diet, is fermented foods. So no overripe bananas. You also want to avoid underripe bananas. You want them to be just yellow, ideally. Citrus, again, I mentioned, is so healing. Lemon water in the morning is very healing for your liver. Now, four other foods that, again, they say to avoid with low histamine, but I disagree, and that's tomatoes, eggplant, strawberries, and papaya. If you have a histamine issue, and if you are reacting to these foods, consider that it's actually the pathogens that are causing those reactions. It's the pathogens that are dying and releasing a poison that's the true cause, right? They don't want you to kill them. So when you kill them, just like a skunk is going to spray its smelly odor when you try to kill it, the same thing with these pathogens. So fruits and veggies are really the food for the good bacteria in your gut. And it's the good bacteria in your gut that's going to help you break down that histamine and help your body make vitamins and the nutrients that your body can use. So those good bacteria, they don't feed on protein, they don't feed on fat, they don't feed on grains, they don't feed on beans, and they don't feed on animal protein. None of those will heal the gut. So carnivore, again, you'd be starving your bacteria. When you reduce or remove fat, you're going to need to add more food to satiate you. You're going to need more calories. You're going to need more starchy carbs and fruits, because these are high in glucose, right? Which is good for your liver. It's good for your nervous system. And there's also the minerals in vegetables in great forms, even green juices like cucumber juice and celery juice. These are the things that are going to heal your liver. If you're loving this video, give me a thumbs up so that YouTube will share my content with other people who need this valuable information. Let's jump into supplements. Supplements that are helpful for histamines. Quercetin is the number one. Anytime you have a histamine issue, quercetin is the supplement that most doctors are going to bring in. Quercetin, yes, in high dose is great, but don't forget the foods that it comes from. It's already in high dose in apples and onions and nettle and citrus and wild blueberries and tomatoes, which is kind of ironic, right? The fact that they want you to remove those things in a low histamine diet. Methylated B vitamins are another important nutrient to bring in, right? And if you can't tolerate methylated B vitamins, check out this video that I did called Surprising Methylfolate Side Effects. If you cannot methylate well, I definitely recommend reaching out to a practitioner. But again, you need those nutrients, but you can't have them now, right? They're causing problems. Remember, you want to methylate because your goal in methylation is to make SAM. SAMe is that cofactor for that HNMT gene, the histamine N methyltransferase gene. that your body uses to reduce histamines. And I do not recommend supplementing, Sam, without working with a practitioner, period. So the supplements I do not recommend on a whole histamine diet. Now, again, you might see benefits from these, but it's not what I recommend. Histamine degrading probiotics. There are some probiotics that are said to increase histamines, and so they have special probiotics that are for reducing histamines. But my issue, histamine issues are a systemic issue, right? They're really, you have to think about the root cause. The root cause is that there are pathogens and toxins underplay and a sluggish liver. So adding probiotics isn't going to do anything for your liver. I mean, again, you could add it in and you might feel a benefit, but it's just understand that it's a Band-Aid, right? It's not really healing you, because probiotics don't do anything to heal the liver. In summary, we talked about histamine intolerance and what some of the symptoms are. We talked about the 3 reasons you have histamine intolerance, which we talked about could include some information on genetics. We talked about a low histamine diet, what I agree with, what I disagree with. I talked about what foods to eat to support your liver, which is in need of a lot of love to help with histamine intolerance. We talked about the low histamine diet, what I agree with, what I disagree with. We talked about the foods to eat to support your liver, which is in need of so much love to help your histamine intolerance issues. Lastly, we talked about the best and worst supplements to support histamine intolerance. I appreciate you being here so much. If you feel the same, please consider subscribing to my channel so that you can be the first to see my videos as I release them each week. Thanks so much for being here. Bye for now.